Dinner at the Park estate looks different when you're the only one who can see murder happening in real time. The crystal wine glass caught the candlelight as Isabella Park lifted it, her crimson lips curving into what anyone else would call a loving smile. She leaned close to her husband, Park Jun-suk, seated at the head of the table in his custom wheelchair. His body motionless, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. The scar along his jawline, a souvenir from the accident 6 months ago, seemed to pulse in the flickering light. "To your health, darling," Isabella whispered, loud enough for the staff to hear. Soft enough that only he caught the edge in her voice. Naomi Carter stood frozen by the service door, silver tray trembling in her hands. She'd seen it. The small vial Isabella had slipped from her Chanel clutch. 3 drops into the wine while everyone's attention was on the appetizer course. 3 drops that glinted like liquid mercury before disappearing into the Bordeaux. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Do nothing, stay invisible, keep the job. That's what survival looked like for someone like her, a foreign waitress with a student visa and $200 in her bank account. But Jun-suk's eyes found hers across the room. Not pleading. Not desperate. Just aware. He knew. And he was trapped in that chair, unable to speak above a rasp, unable to move anything below his shoulders. The glass moved toward his lips. Naomi's feet moved before her brain caught up. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." Her tray clattered to the floor, red wine exploding across the Persian rug as she stumbled forward, her hand catching Isabella's wrist. The poisoned glass tipped, spilling its contents across the white tablecloth. "I'm so clumsy, Mrs. Park, please, let me." "You idiot." Isabella's mask slipped for just a heartbeat, rage flashing in her perfectly made-up eyes before the gracious hostess' smile returned. "It's fine. Accidents happen. Just bring another glass." Naomi bowed repeatedly, her hands shaking as she gathered broken stemware. In the chaos, she grabbed the clean backup glass from the sideboard and filled it from the decanter. When she placed it in Isabella's hand, she caught Jun-suk's gaze again. Something shifted there, a spark of recognition, of understanding. He drank the clean wine. Isabella watched, satisfied, already calculating her next move. And Naomi realized with cold certainty that she'd just made herself the only thing standing between a paralyzed crime lord and his wife's murderous ambition. "All right, I know what you're thinking. How does a shy waitress end up in a life-or-death game with a mafia boss and his sociopathic wife? And what happens when the man everyone fears can't even lift a finger to defend himself? Trust me, this story is going to grip you by the throat and not let go. If you love tales about courage in impossible situations, about loyalty when it could cost you everything, you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you would do in Naomi's shoes. Would you risk it all to save a stranger, or keep your head down and survive? Drop your answer below. Done? Perfect. Let's continue. 6 months earlier, Park Jun-suk was a ghost that walked in daylight. The shipment clears customs Thursday. Baek Jin-ho placed the encrypted tablet on the teak desk, his voice barely above a murmur. The Busan crew is in position. Jun-suk didn't look up from the contract he was signing. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him framed Seoul's skyline like a throne room overlooking a kingdom. To the business world, he was the brilliant CEO of Park Industries, a shipping and tech conglomerate. To a select few, he was something else entirely, the architect of an empire built in shadows, where cargo manifests told only half the story and handshakes carried more weight than contracts. Isabella confirmed the dinner meeting? Jun-suk finally asked, his voice carrying that particular quiet that made men twice his size step back. The minister will be there. She's handling the arrangements personally. At 41, Jun-suk had the kind of presence that bent rooms around him. Tall, lean, with eyes that could dissect a man's soul or charm a boardroom depending on what the moment required. He'd built his empire from nothing, the orphaned son of a seamstress who'd learned early that the world respects only power and the intelligence to wield it. He signed the last contract without reading it. Jinho had been his right hand for 18 years. If you couldn't trust the man who'd taken a knife meant for you in Incheon, trust was meaningless. The door opened without a knock. Only one person had that privilege. Isabella glided in, wrapped in Dior and diamonds, her beauty weaponized to perfection. 5 years his junior, his wife of 4 years, she was the crowning piece of his legitimate facade. The perfect partner for a man building respectability on top of a criminal foundation. "Darling, we should leave soon," she said, her American accent still faint after a decade in Korea. "The minister doesn't like to be kept waiting." Jun-suk checked his Patek Philippe. Security cleared the route. Jinho arranged everything. She moved behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders. "Always so careful. That's why you've survived this long." The motorcade was military precision. Black SUVs bracketing his armored sedan, routes checked twice, every variable accounted for. Isabella's hand rested on his thigh as they pulled away from Park Tower, her diamond wedding band catching the streetlights. "You're quiet tonight," she observed. Thinking about the jade, his wife had been sitting beside him. The bullets had shredded his side of the car while hers remained pristine. The hit came at an intersection she'd chosen, during a meeting she'd arranged, on a route Jinho had secured. But Jinho was his brother in all but blood. Which meant someone had used his trust as a weapon. The hospital room door opened softly. Isabella entered like she was walking into a funeral, her Hermes scarf draped just so, her eyes rimmed with what anyone else would read as recent tears. She'd always been a magnificent actress. "June." Her voice broke perfectly. "Oh God, June, I thought I'd lost you." She took his hand, the one he could still feel, still move. Her skin was cold despite the heated room. She smelled like Chanel and something else underneath, something sharp. Fear? Excitement? He couldn't tell anymore. Maybe he never could. "The doctor said," she paused, manufactured a sob. "They said you might not walk again. But we'll find the best specialists. Money doesn't matter. Whatever it takes." He tried to speak, found his voice was barely a rasp. "Who?" "The police think it was the Gwangju crew. Retaliation for the port deal." She squeezed his hand. "Jinho is already handling it. He's devastated, June. He blames himself for the security failure." Of course she'd have an answer ready. A convenient enemy, far enough away to be plausible. And Jinho, loyal Jinho, would be consumed with guilt, too distracted to see the real threat. "The business," Jun-suk managed. "Don't worry about that now. Just focus on recovery." Isabella's smile was tender poison. "I'll handle everything. The board has already approved temporary measures. They know you'd want the empire protected while you heal." There it was. Not even 24 hours and she was already positioning herself at the head of his table. He studied her face, this woman he'd married because she was beautiful and ambitious and smart enough to be useful. He'd never loved her. Love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. But he'd respected her intelligence, valued her business acumen. He'd never considered she might be smarter than him. "Rest now," Isabella said, standing. "I've hired private nurses. Round-the-clock care. Only the best for you." She leaned down, pressed her lips to his forehead. "I'll take care of everything, darling. You just focus on getting better." The promise sounded like a threat. After she left, Jun-suk stared at the ceiling, doing the math he should have done years ago. The accident had been surgical. His empire was already being redistributed. And he was trapped in a body that wouldn't obey him, unable to fight back, unable to run, unable to do anything but lie there and wait for whatever came next. In the underworld, weakness was a death sentence. And Park Jun-suk had just become the weakest man in Seoul. The private nurse Isabella hired lasted 3 weeks before being replaced. Too observant, Isabella had said with that perfect smile. The physical therapist made it 2 months. Too aggressive with the treatment plan. One by one, anyone who showed genuine interest in Jun-suk's recovery disappeared, replaced by staff who followed Isabella's instructions with religious devotion. Then came Naomi Carter. She arrived on a Tuesday, sent by an agency that specialized in discreet household staff for Seoul's elite. 26, American, working her way through a linguistics degree at Yonsei. Isabella hired her specifically for private dinner service. Background checked, visa verified, completely unremarkable. Perfect. Jun-suk watched from his wheelchair as she set up for that first dinner, moving through the dining room like she was trying to become invisible. Her hands trembled slightly when Isabella gave instructions, her eyes stayed down, her voice barely above a whisper. Pray behavior. Isabella collected broken things. The evening unfolded with calculated normalcy. Isabella playing the devoted wife, discussing his medications with false concern, mentioning how the doctors were amazed he hadn't shown more improvement. 6 months and still no sensation below his chest. Such a tragedy. She poured the wine herself, Bordeaux from his private collection. Jun-suk had stopped tasting anything in his drinks weeks ago. Whatever she was giving him had no flavor, but it left him increasingly foggy, his thoughts moving through wet cement. The doctors called it depression, a natural response to trauma. He knew better. But proving it required a clarity he no longer possessed. Until the waitress stumbled and the glass shattered and suddenly he was drinking clean wine for the first time in months. The difference wasn't immediate. Isabella watched him like a hawk through dinner, her smile fixed, her eyes calculating. But Jun-suk felt it by midnight, the fog lifting degree by degree. By morning, his thoughts had edges again. She'd been poisoning him. Slowly, carefully, keeping him just coherent enough to avoid suspicion but too impaired to fight back. And that terrified girl with the serving tray had just given him the first weapon he'd had in half a year. Naomi returned 2 days later for another dinner service. Isabella barely acknowledged her existence, already confident in her invisibility. But when Naomi leaned close to refill his water glass, she whispered 5 words that changed everything. I know what she's doing. Jun-suk's hand jerked, water sloshing. Isabella glanced over from her phone call, eyebrow raised. Naomi apologized profusely, dabbing at the spill with a napkin, her face flushed with embarrassment. The perfect servant, clumsy and forgettable. But her eyes when they met his held something he hadn't seen in months. Clarity. Purpose. Fear, yes, but also a fierce determination that reminded him of younger days, before power made him lazy. She'd chosen a side in a war she barely understood, and the choice was going to get her killed. He managed the smallest nod. Barely a movement, easily missed. She saw it. That night, lying in the darkness of his bedroom suite, Jun-suk did something he hadn't done since the accident. He planned. The poison meant Isabella wanted him alive but incapacitated. Alive meant she needed something from him still. Signatures, probably. Accounts she couldn't access. The Empire's real architecture existed in his head and his encrypted systems. She'd keep him breathing until she'd extracted everything of value. Which meant he had time. And now, impossibly, he had an ally. A frightened waitress with student debt who'd just signed her own death warrant to save a man she didn't know. Park Jun-suk smiled in the darkness for the first time in 6 months. The game wasn't over yet. Baek Jin-ho came to say goodbye on a Wednesday afternoon, his face carved from stone, his eyes red-rimmed in a way Jun-suk had never seen. 18 years, 3 bullets, and countless bodies between them, and it ended in a sunlit sitting room with Isabella hovering like a beautiful vulture. The board thinks it's best, Jin-ho said, the words clearly rehearsed. With everything that's happened, a fresh start. New security protocols. Translation, Isabella had outmaneuvered him. Probably threatened him with evidence of crimes that would bury him for life. Jun-suk's empire was built on loyalty and compromise in equal measure, and his wife had apparently inherited the keys to both kingdoms. I understand. Jun-suk's voice came out stronger now, the fog continuing to lift with each clean meal. Isabella noticed, her eyes narrowing fractionally before the concerned wife mask slipped back into place. Jinho has been under such stress, she said, her hand resting on Jun-suk's shoulder like ownership. The guilt over the security failure has been eating at him. This is better for everyone. After Jinho left, shoulders bent like a broken old man, Isabella made her move. I've been thinking about the staff, she said, pouring herself wine. Never offering him any anymore, he noticed. Too risky now that she couldn't personally supervise every glass. The house is too crowded. Too many people coming and going. You need peace to recover. Over the next 2 weeks, the purge was surgical. The chef who'd cooked for Jun-suk for 8 years, gone. The head of household who'd known every secret of the estate, retired. The security team, replaced with men whose loyalty was purchased, not earned. Even the groundskeeper, an old man who'd tended the gardens since Jun-suk bought the property, disappeared one morning. Isabella was building a cage with no witnesses. Naomi survived the cut by being exactly what Isabella wanted, forgettable, temporary, irrelevant. She came 3 times a week now, always for private dinners, always silent and efficient. But she was learning the house's rhythms, the blind spots in the new security cameras Isabella had installed, the moments when the hired guards took their smoke breaks. The first real communication came through a water glass. Naomi was clearing the dinner service when she placed Jun-suk's glass on the side table. Condensation had fogged the crystal, and in it, traced with her finger so faint it might have been accident, were 2 words, your phone? He glanced at Isabella, engrossed in a call with her lawyer. His phone had been misplaced months ago. He nodded once toward his bedroom, where it likely sat in some drawer, locked away like everything else he'd once controlled. That night, at 2 a.m., Naomi let herself into the estate using the service entrance code she'd memorized. The new security was expensive but lazy, their rounds predictable. She found Jun-suk awake in his wheelchair by the bedroom window, as if he'd been waiting. She held up the phone she'd found hidden in Isabella's office safe. The look on his face was worth every terrified heartbeat of her search. 10 minutes, she whispered. That's all we have. Jun-suk's fingers trembled as he unlocked it, muscle memory fighting against months of disuse. His encrypted messages, his account access, his network, all still there. Isabella had kept it as insurance, never imagining someone would be foolish enough to steal it back. You're insane, he rasped, something like admiration in his voice. So are you, Naomi replied, her eyes on the door. What do you need? He looked at this scared girl who'd broken into a Mafia boss's bedroom to return his phone, and felt something he thought the accident had killed. Hope. The doctor had been clear, complete paralysis below T6, permanent spinal cord damage, no hope of recovery. Isabella had smiled with perfect sadness when she'd repeated the prognosis to visitors, her hand clutching Jun-suk's unfeeling one. But doctors could be bought. And diagnoses could be manufactured. Try again, Naomi whispered, her hand supporting his left leg during their 4th midnight session. She'd researched spinal injuries for days, watched therapy videos, read medical journals she barely understood. Focus on your big toe. Just think about moving it. Jun-suk's face was slick with sweat, his jaw clenched so tight she worried his teeth would crack. 3 weeks of drinking clean water, eating food Naomi personally prepared and smuggled in, and the fog had burned away completely. With clarity came sensation, faint as ghost touches but undeniably there. Pins and needles in his thighs. Phantom warmth in his calves. The MRI Isabella's doctor had shown him was someone else's scan. He was certain now. I can't, he started, frustration cracking his voice. Yes, you can. Naomi's tone was fierce, stripped of the timid waitress act she wore for Isabella. I've seen you move your knee a quarter inch. That's not nothing. That's everything. She'd become a different person in these stolen hours between 2 and 4 a.m., when the security guards were drowsy and Isabella slept her drugged, dreamless sleep. The scared girl had been a mask as calculated as his own. Underneath was someone harder, someone who'd survived enough to recognize a survivor when she saw one. Why are you doing this? Jun-suk asked, not for the first time. Because someone has to. Her hands moved to his ankle, manipulating it through the range of motion exercises she'd memorized. And because I watched my stepfather beat my mother for 6 years while everyone looked away. People who see evil and do nothing are just as guilty. There it was. The wound that made her brave. Your stepfather. Is why I left America. Her smile with sharp edges. Is why I know what a predator looks like. Your wife has the same eyes he did. Jun-suk studied her in the dim light filtering through the curtains. 26 years old, barely scraping by in a foreign country, risking her life for a man whose empire was built on violence. She should have run. Instead, she'd stayed and learned his schedule, memorized his medications, become his lifeline to a world he'd been cut off from. Focus, she said, redirecting him. Big toe. You're close, I can see the muscle trying to fire. He closed his eyes, blocking out everything except the phantom sensation in his foot. In his prime, he'd commanded hundreds of men with a word. Now he was locked in mortal combat with his own nervous system, trying to move a single toe a single millimeter. The tremor was so slight Naomi almost missed it. There. She gripped his foot, her eyes wide. Did you feel that? You moved it. Jun-suk, you moved your toe. He opened his eyes, staring at his foot like it belonged to a stranger. The toe had shifted, barely perceptible, but undeniably there. Proof that the paralysis wasn't complete. That Isabella's doctors had lied. That his body could heal if given the chance. Again, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to crack through. They worked until dawn threatened, until Naomi had to slip away before the household stirred. But before she left, she did something unexpected. She took his hand, the one that still worked, and squeezed it gently. We're going to win, she said with absolute certainty. She doesn't know you're already fighting back. After she was gone, Jun-suk sat in the darkness and moved his toe again. And again. Each tiny movement a declaration of war. Isabella wanted him helpless. He'd show her what a caged dragon could still do. The man arrived during the afternoon, when spring light made the estate look almost innocent. Naomi was arranging flowers in the main hall when she heard Isabella's laugh, the genuine one she never used with Jun-suk, followed by a man's low chuckle. She recognized him immediately from the society pages. Daniel Winters, American venture capitalist, Isabella's business associate. Tall, silver-haired, expensive in the way only old money could achieve. He'd been photographed with Isabella at charity galas, gallery openings, always standing just close enough to suggest intimacy without confirming it. Darling, you didn't tell me we'd have company, Isabella purred, leading him into the sitting room where Jun-suk sat in his wheelchair, a book open on his lap that he'd been pretending to read. Daniel wanted to discuss the merger personally. Isabella's hand rested on Winter's arm a beat too long. Isn't that thoughtful? Jun-suk's expression remained neutral, but Naomi saw his fingers tighten on the wheelchair's armrest. She busied herself with the flowers, invisible and forgotten, as Winters launched into talk of stock portfolios and board positions. The kind of business discussion that sounded legitimate but was really about carving up an empire. You look well, Jun-suk, Winters said, his concern expertly manufactured. Better than I expected, given what Isabella's told me about your condition. I have good days and bad days. Jun-suk's voice was carefully flat, the fog he'd been faking for Isabella's benefit. Today is manageable. That's wonderful to hear. Winters exchanged a glance with Isabella, something passing between them that made Naomi's stomach clench. Isabella's been so devoted to your care. You're lucky to have her. After they retreated to Isabella's study, Naomi found a reason to dust the hallway outside. The door wasn't fully closed, and voices carried. Can't keep waiting. Winter's voice, impatient now. The Gwangju crew is getting suspicious. They paid for a corpse, not an invalid. Naomi's hand froze on the vase she was holding. I'm managing it. Isabella's tone had lost all its softness. The dosage was working perfectly until that clumsy bitch spilled the wine. But he's declining again. Another month, maybe less. A month is too long. The accounts are locked behind his biometrics. Once he's too far gone, we lose access entirely. Then what do you suggest? Ice in Isabella's voice now. Smothering him with a pillow? That worked so well with your first wife. Silence, heavy and dangerous. Tonight, Winters finally said. An accidental overdose of his pain medication. Tragic but unsurprising given his condition. You play the grieving widow, I consolidate the board, and we're in Zurich by the weekend. Tonight, Isabella repeated, tasting the word. Yes. I'm tired of playing nurse to a man I never loved. Naomi backed away from the door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Tonight. They were going to kill him tonight. She found Jun-suk in the garden, where Isabella had wheeled him for fresh air and sunshine. His eyes found hers immediately, reading the panic she couldn't quite hide. What is it? He asked quietly. Naomi knelt beside his chair, pretending to adjust the blanket across his lap. Winters isn't here for business. He's the one who ordered the hit. He and Isabella planned everything together. I know. Jun-suk's voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. I've known for weeks. What else? They're going to kill you tonight. Overdose. They need your biometric access before you deteriorate too far. She watched emotions flicker across his face, rage, betrayal, then something harder, colder. The man who'd built an empire in shadows hadn't survived this long by panicking. Then tonight, he said, his voice soft as a blade sliding from its sheath, we kill them first. They had 6 hours before dinner, when Isabella would make her move. 6 hours to dismantle an empire and disappear the one thing she wanted most, money. The laptop is in her office, Naomi said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. Third drawer, right side. She keeps it locked, but I've watched her enter the code. 4792. Jun-suk nodded, his mind already moving through the sequence. The black funds are distributed across 17 accounts. Cayman, Singapore, Switzerland. She thinks I keep the access codes written down somewhere, but they're all in my head. Can you remember them all? His smile was sharp. I remember everything. The names of every man I've buried, every deal I've made, every secret that keeps my empire breathing. Numbers are easy. At 3 p.m., when Isabella and Winters left for a late lunch, celebrating early, Naomi thought bitterly, they moved. Naomi retrieved the laptop with shaking hands while Jun-suk directed her to his study, where his personal computer sat unused for months, collecting dust like evidence of a dead man. Boot it up, he said. Password is NGK, 1982, Seoul. Capital letters, exactly as I said. His mother's initials, his birth year, the city that made him. Naomi's fingers flew across the keyboard as the system came to life. Layers of encryption, security protocols that would have made a government jealous, all of it still active because Isabella had never found this machine. She'd been too focused on the obvious laptop, the phones, the visible technology. She'd forgotten that men like Jun-suk always kept an insurance policy. The offshore interface is behind a false directory, he said, leaning forward as much as his body allowed. Documents, then Korean folder, then the file labeled Alma's recipes. Click it twice, wait 3 seconds, then click it once more. The screen flickered, then dissolved into a command line interface that looked like something from a spy thriller. Numbers scrolled past, account balances that made Naomi's breath catch. Hundreds of millions, maybe billions, all tied to Park Jun-suk's encrypted biometric access. Now the hard part, he said. You'll need my fingerprint for the first verification. Right index finger, the scanner is built into the mouse pad. Naomi pressed his finger to the sensor, feeling the faint warmth of circulation returning. 3 weeks of secret therapy, of coaxed movement and stubborn determination, and he could almost make a fist now. Almost. Retinal scan next, Jun-suk continued. Hold the laptop up, angle the camera toward my right eye. She did, watching the screen process the biometric data, layer after layer of security peeling away. This was his life's work, she realized. 20 years of calculated violence and strategic brilliance, all reduced to numbers in the dark corners of the financial world. Where are we sending it? She asked. New account. I set it up 3 weeks ago through a proxy server. Untraceable, at least for long enough. He rattled off a string of numbers and letters, an account number that existed somewhere in the digital void. Transfer everything. Every account, every asset. Leave her nothing but the legitimate business, and even that's mortgaged to oblivion. Naomi's hands moved across the keyboard, following his instructions with precision. Transfer amounts, verification codes, biometric confirmations. Each click was a piece of his empire flowing away from Isabella's grasp, from Winter's ambitions, from the bloody foundation it was built on. Last one, she said, her voice tight. Singapore account. 1.3 billion. Send it. She clicked confirm, and watched the balance drain to 0. It's done, Naomi whispered. It's all gone. Jun-suk exhaled, something like satisfaction in his eyes. Not gone. Transformed. Isabella wanted my empire? She can have the shell. The soul of it just disappeared. Outside, they heard a car in the drive. Isabella and Winters, returning early. The real game was about to begin. Naomi had just closed the laptop when she heard the footsteps in the hallway. Too fast, too early. They weren't supposed to be back for another hour. Hide it, Jun-suk hissed, and she shoved the laptop under a stack of medical journals on his desk just as the door swung open. Isabella stood in the doorway, her Prada heels clicking against the hardwood as she stepped inside. Her eyes moved from Naomi to Jun-suk and back again, calculating, measuring, sensing something wrong in the air. Naomi. Her voice was silk over razor wire. What are you doing in my husband's private study? Naomi's mind raced, her heart threatening to burst through her chest. Mr. Park asked for water. I was just. There's water in every room of this house. Isabella moved closer, predatory grace in every step. Try again. Naomi clutched the empty glass in her hand like a lifeline. He wanted fresh water. From the kitchen. I took the long way back because you wanted to snoop. Isabella's smile was poisonous. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The way you hover around him, the little glances you share. Did you really think you were clever enough to fool me? Mrs. Park, I don't know what you... Shut up. Isabella's mask cracked completely, rage pouring through. Do you have any idea what you've stumbled into? What kind of man he is? What he's done? Jun-suk's voice cut through the tension, carefully weak, carefully confused. Isabella, what's happening? Why are you shouting? Stay out of this, Isabella snapped without looking at him. This little bitch has been poisoning you against me, hasn't she? Filling your head with paranoid fantasies. Naomi saw the opening and took it, letting tears spill down her cheeks. Real fear made them easy to summon. I'm sorry, Mrs. Park. I was just trying to help. Mr. Park seemed so lonely, and I thought. You thought what? That you could replace me? Isabella laughed, bitter and sharp. You're a waitress with a student visa and $30 in her bank account. You're nobody. You're right. Naomi let her voice break, shoulders curling inward, becoming small and harmless. I'm nobody. I just felt sorry for him, that's all. Watching him suffer like this, it made me sad. I didn't mean anything by it. Isabella studied her, looking for the lie beneath the tears. Naomi had learned from the best. 6 years watching her mother survive had taught her how to become whatever the predator needed to see. Right now, Isabella needed to see a foolish, sentimental girl who'd made a mistake. You felt sorry for him, Isabella repeated, her tone mocking. How touching. Well, your services are no longer required. You're fired. I want you out of this house in the next 10 minutes. But I need this job, please. Should have thought of that before you forgot your place. Isabella pulled out her phone. I'm calling the agency right now. You'll be lucky if you're not deported by morning. Naomi looked at Jun-suk, letting desperation show in her eyes. He gave the faintest shake of his head. Not yet. Trust me. I understand, Naomi whispered, bowing her head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Park. I'll go. She moved toward the door, but Isabella blocked her path. Empty your pockets first. I want to make sure you haven't stolen anything. Naomi's blood went cold. The USB drive in her jacket pocket held copies of everything, the account transfers, the evidence, their insurance policy. If Isabella found it, they were both dead. Mrs. Park, I would never. Empty your pockets. Naomi reached into her right pocket, pulling out her phone and some coins. Isabella gestured impatiently at the left side, where the USB drive sat like a ticking bomb against her ribs. Then Jun-suk's voice, stronger than before, Isabella, enough. Something in his tone made Isabella turn. Let her go, Jun-suk said, his voice carrying an edge Isabella hadn't heard in months. She's done nothing wrong. Isabella's eyes narrowed. Since when do you defend the help? Since I'm tired of your theater. He met her gaze directly, no fog, no confusion, just cold clarity. Let her leave with her dignity. She'll be gone in 10 minutes like you asked. Something flickered across Isabella's face, suspicion, uncertainty, but the power dynamic had been established for too long. She stepped aside with a dismissive wave. Fine. 10 minutes. Then I never want to see you again. Naomi fled, clutching the USB drive through her pocket like a prayer. Dinner was served at 8, as Isabella had planned. She'd changed into something black and elegant, morning clothes chosen in advance. Winters sat across from Jun-suk, playing the concerned friend. The table was set for 3, crystal gleaming, candles casting shadows that danced like ghosts. I thought we should have a proper meal, Isabella said, pouring wine with steady hands. Just the 3 of us. To discuss the future. The future, Jun-suk repeated. His voice still carried that false weakness, but underneath it was something else now, something waiting. Daniel has been incredibly helpful during this difficult time, Isabella continued, her hand finding Winters across the table. His financial expertise has been invaluable in stabilizing your holdings. Our holdings, Winters corrected with a smile. We're partners now, Jun-suk. Isabella and I both want what's best for the company. I'm sure you do. The first course arrived, delivered by one of the new staff who'd never known Jun-suk as anything but an invalid. Isabella watched him struggle to lift his fork, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. This was her victory dinner, the last meal before the overdose that would free her. "I've been thinking about legacy," Jun-suk said between bites. "What we leave behind when we're gone." "A bit morbid," Winters said lightly. "Is it? I built an empire from nothing. 20 years of work, of sacrifice." He looked directly at Isabella. "Of trust. And now I wonder what it was all for." "For security," Isabella said, her voice honey-sweet with poison underneath. "For power. For everything you ever wanted. You should be proud, darling." "Should I?" The main course came and went. Isabella grew increasingly relaxed, her laughter genuine now, already counting the money she thought was hers. Winters matched her drink for drink, celebrating a murder not yet committed. Then Isabella raised her glass for a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, her smile radiant. "To letting go of the past and embracing the future." "To truth," Jun-suk countered, his hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests. And then he stood. The movement was slow, unsteady, muscles relearning their purpose after months of forced stillness. But he stood, rising from the chair like Lazarus from the tomb, and the wine glass shattered in Isabella's hand. "What?" Winters was on his feet, backing away. "That's impossible." "The doctors said." "Your doctors said," Jun-suk corrected, his voice shedding all pretense of weakness. "The ones you paid to falsify my diagnosis. To keep me compliant while you dismantled everything I built." Isabella's face had gone white, then red with rage. "You can't, this isn't. I can walk, Isabella. I've been walking for weeks." Each word was a hammer blow. "While you were planning my murder, I was planning my resurrection." The dining room doors opened, and Naomi entered, no longer dressed as a waitress but in a crisp suit, flanked by two men in prosecutors' badges. Behind them, the police. "The accounts you thought you'd inherit?" Jun-suk's smile was ice. "Empty. The black funds you killed for? Gone. The empire you wanted to rule? Dissolved." "You bastard," Isabella lunged, but the police were faster. "Isabella Park, Daniel Winters, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial fraud." As they cuffed her, Isabella's composure finally shattered. "You can't do this. I'm your wife." "You were my executioner," Jun-suk said quietly. "Now you're just another prisoner." He watched them drag her away, her screams echoing through the mansion that had been his cage. Then his legs gave out, and Naomi caught him before he fell. The trial lasted 6 weeks and dominated every news cycle in Seoul. Isabella's face stared from magazine covers, the beautiful wife who'd tried to poison her paralyzed husband for his fortune. Winters cooperated immediately, providing evidence of the Gwangju hit, the falsified medical records, the slow-acting toxin purchased from a chemistry professor in Busan. He'd get 20 years. Isabella would never see freedom again. Jun-suk testified from a wheelchair he no longer needed but still used, playing the sympathetic victim one last time. The prosecutors had been skeptical when Naomi first approached them with the USB drive, until the account transfers proved every word. The evidence was irrefutable: attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud on a scale that shocked even the jaded prosecutors who thought they'd seen everything. What they didn't know was that Jun-suk had also provided evidence against himself. His own crimes, meticulously documented, handed over to different prosecutors in different jurisdictions. The empire he'd built in shadows was being systematically dismantled, not by enemies, but by its own architect. "You're committing professional suicide," his lawyer had warned. "No," Jun-suk had replied. "I'm committing murder. The man I was needs to die if I'm going to live with who I want to be." The legitimate businesses were sold at fair prices, the proceeds divided among the families of men who died in his service. The black funds, the ones he transferred in those frantic hours before Isabella's final move, went to victims' advocacy groups, addiction treatment centers, programs for at-risk youth. Apologies written in currency to people who'd never know his name. Baek Jin-ho came to see him one last time before Jun-suk left Seoul. "I failed you," Jin-ho said, his voice heavy with 18 years of loyalty and 6 months of guilt. "You loved me," Jun-suk replied. "That's not failure. That's what made her strategy work. She weaponized your loyalty, and I let her because I was too arrogant to see the threat in my own bed. Where will you go?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can learn to walk properly again." Jun-suk smiled. "Somewhere I can learn to be someone else." They embraced like brothers, and when Jin-ho left, part of Park Jun-suk left with him. The house was in Jeju, far from Seoul's towers and trafficked streets. Small by his former standards, with a garden that needed tending and windows that overlooked the sea. Naomi had found it, negotiated the price, arranged the logistics of disappearing without actually hiding. "It needs work," she said as they stood in the empty living room, spring light streaming through dusty windows. "Good." Jun-suk's cane tapped against the floor as he walked, still unsteady but improving daily. "I need to learn how to build things instead of taking them." She'd stayed through everything, the trial, the media circus, the revelation of who he'd really been. She'd seen the worst of him laid bare in courtroom testimony and hadn't flinched. When prosecutors offered her witness protection, she'd declined. When universities offered her full scholarships away from Korea, she'd refused. "Why?" he'd asked her once. "You saved my life. You don't owe me anything more." "Maybe I'm not staying for you," she'd replied. "Maybe I'm staying for me. Maybe I need to see how this story ends." Now they stood in their new beginning, two people who'd survived the same nightmare and chosen something harder than survival, transformation. "I should warn you," Jun-suk said, his voice lighter than she'd ever heard it. "I don't know how to live a normal life. I've never grown vegetables or fixed a fence or done anything that wasn't calculated for maximum advantage. Then we'll learn together." Naomi took his free hand, the one that had signed death warrants and now would plant seeds. No empires. No shadows. Just two people figuring out how to be decent. Just decent. Maybe exceptional at being decent. Through the window, the sea stretched endless and forgiving. Seoul was a memory, Isabella a closed chapter, the underworld someone else's problem. Park Jun-suk had died in that mansion. Who he'd become was still being written. And for the first time in 20 years, he had no idea what came next. It felt like freedom.